Welcome to the Trail and Ultra Running Training Podcast. My name is Will Frantz, and I'm here to help you improve your training so you can have more fun out on the trails. Welcome back to Trail and Ultra Running Training, whether you're listening to this on the podcast or watching this on video. I'd love if you would just share this with somebody else. It'd be really appreciated. The more people that watch it indicates to the algorithms that people like it, and then it'll show it to more people, and then we just kind of spiral this thing, hopefully out of control, and then more people just train in a way that helps them and helps them avoid getting hurt as much as possible. So if you could share this with someone who you think might need it, or leave a rating or review, I'd really appreciate it. Anyway, let's get into low back stuff. So today I want to talk about why we might have low back pain while running. This is a really common thing. I just had a conversation with one of the athletes I coach over the weekend about low back pain while running. And it's one of those things that actually can take a little while to fix depending on what your problem is. So for some, well, pretty much in all instances, it is going to be some version of weakness. And that weakness can come from multiple places, because what we're really doing is probably putting too much load on the muscles of the low back for one reason or another. So when we're running, we want to have a neutral, flat pelvis. You don't want to be tilted forward. You don't want to be tilted backwards. We don't want to have this big hip shift side to side. We want to have a fairly flat pelvis. Yes, it's going to tilt a little bit and move a little bit as your body and legs move, but we want to have this vision like your pelvis is a bowl of water, and we want to lose as little water as possible as we're going through our running. And there are a lot of muscles responsible for this. This is why when I did a video on core training a couple weeks ago, it took forever, because there's a lot of muscles that are really in your core, right? If we take it from a 360-degree perspective. And if we are looking at the pelvis, the thing that tends to go wrong most often is it tilts forward. So we're your butt kind of shoots up and back. Your low back ends up in extension, meaning your natural lumbar curve gets even more aggressive, and we end up tilted forward. This causes a couple problems. One of them being that you have to push even farther back to use your glutes. So you're going to not really be able to use one of the strongest muscles in your body, arguably the strongest muscle in your body, to create the power that it's supposed to create when you're running. So it will decrease performance. The other one is that instead of being able to put a bunch of your torso weight, your torso weighs and whatever it weighs, instead of being able to support that with 360 degrees of your core, we're going to end up supporting it with the muscles of your low back, the muscles of your deep back, whatever you want to call it, right? However you want to phrase that musculature, because it's not just in your low back. It runs deep and down your entire spine. But if we're overloading those muscles, they're not really designed to support your entire torso and head weight, etc. They're really designed to support a portion of that weight. So one of the big things that I try to work on with people is creating the ability to tuck the pelvis underneath. And we don't want to go back to what we'd call posterior pelvic tilt, where we're overcorrecting the other direction, but we do want to be able to create that movement, and a lot of us don't even have access to it. So if we're on all fours and do something like a cat-cow, your pelvis should be able to move really significantly in both directions. Same kind of idea if you're up against a wall. We should pretty simply be able to make the low back flat against that wall, and maybe tilt even a little off of it by pressing low back into wall using the abdomen. So if we can't do that, we want to regain that connection to the muscles that tilt that pelvis. A couple exercises that can really help this are a hollow hold. I really like reverse crunches for this because it forces that pelvic tuck. You lay on the ground or lay on a bench, grab something stable overhead, and then roll your spine up and off the ground. You may not get super high. You're not trying to shoot your hips to the sky. That's probably going to defeat the purpose. You want to just like roll up like an armadillo or a roly-poly and then place your spine back down vertebra by vertebra and regain that control. And if we can do that really well and we stay really solid, then that can be one thing that can really help work on some low back pain by correcting muscle imbalances. Another thing that tends to cause this is like this rounded shoulders, because if we're rounded here in the upper back and we have even like a degree or two of lean forward, then that just puts a lot of weight on these muscles that they aren't really designed to take, right? Like it doesn't need to be excessive. You don't need to be in this like big hunched position like a turtle shell back, right? We just need to have a couple degrees, especially if we're doing something like 100-miler. And over the course of time, like they're going to fatigue a lot more than they need to. So if we can work the rear of the shoulder, the upper back, get posture to open up a little more, it will do a couple things. One of them is give your lungs more space to breathe and expand so that we're not breathing just out of the upper back. It's not just coming from there. We can like actually expand the lungs and the rib cage in all directions. That will help from a breathing perspective, so you'll be able to intake more oxygen. We'll also take some of that load off the lower back because we won't be like adding a little more to that. We want to stay stacked. We want to keep the rib cage well stacked over the pelvis so the rib cage stays upright, the pelvis stays flat, and we keep that stacked position as we run, and that will keep all of the muscles of your midsection, torso, core, whatever you want to call it, working equally as they're supposed to, rather than overstressing one side or the other, right? And a couple things that tend to exacerbate this is like, how does your pack fit, right? So if you're wearing a running pack and we already have some of this hunch, then the pack tends to make that even worse. And again, even a couple like degrees of rounding can make a really big difference. So if your pack fits like really tight to your body, then you are going to be more likely to not need to round, right? Like I remember being in high school and we had a fairly big campus, and as a result, I would load my backpack with pretty much all the books I needed for the day, which is way too many books, and I'd walk around and I'd end up in this like counterbalance position trying to off weight the excessive weight of my backpack. And of course this created bad things for my posture at the time. And if we look like even a small degree version of that while we're running, it's just going to create problems. We want to have a pack that fits nice and tight. There's a reason that Salomon brand is called Second Skin, because it does want to feel like it's like really flush to your body. So does your pack fit correctly? Is it loaded in a way that like prevents jostling as much as possible? Is it like a really good fit to your back? If not, then we should probably get a new pack, even if I realize they're expensive. But if that's a possibility for you, then get a pack that fits better. And if that's not a possibility, then let's cinch that thing down and make it fit as well as possible. We also have like, are you fueling well enough? I feel like this is kind of a silly thing, because it feels like fueling is mostly legs, etc. But it's really all of your muscles are using carbohydrates. So if you're under fueling, then we're going to slowly fatigue more than we need to. And if these muscles are working a little harder than we want them to, and you're under fueling, we're just going to fatigue over time. It's just like your legs, right? Like if your legs are not quite as strong as you might like them to be to run the stuff that you want to run, then one way that we can at least mitigate the damage is going to be fuel appropriately and throw a bunch of carbs at the problem, and that should help. We can say the same things about all the other muscles. So if your torso is working significantly to keep you upright and you're not quite as strong as you'd like to be, then if we fuel appropriately, you will get less fatigued, and as a result, you'll be able to run better. And then we can look at other pieces of gear, like do your shoes fit right, all of these things. Anything that's just a little off, that tilts you a little bit forward, or like forces your back to extend a little more than it needs to, and just keeps us in this place, is going to cause this problem. And We can go deep into the musculature here about like tight psoas or whatever all of that stuff means, right? But we need to figure out how to make your rib cage and pelvis stack in a way that minimizes the use of your midsection, or at least like equally uses your midsection as we do this running thing. And especially if we're going for longer distances and longer amounts of time. Now, this is not going to be an overnight thing. However old you are, that's how long it has taken you to develop your current posture. It is probably like adjusted over the years due to different sports and different positions, but especially if you work a desk job and we're on the computer all the time, we tend to be enforced here. This is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not ideal, and we don't need to be this like ramrod upright posture, but we do want to be able to at least have access to that posture and make that not feel like a ton of work. If like pinning your shoulders down and back a little bit and keeping your chest up and keeping your pelvis flat and rib cage over your pelvis is a really fatiguing thing for you to do standing here, then it's probably going to be an even more fatiguing thing for you to do while you run forever. So let's make sure we have access to that posture and it doesn't feel like a ton of work. And again, this doesn't mean we need to try and fix this overnight. Let's add some upper back work, like bent over T-bar rows would be really good if you have access to some kind of machine that supports your chest. We can even just do a chest supported row on a bench where we lean forward, place our chest on a bench, take two dumbbells, and try to pinch your shoulder blades together as much as possible. But we're really trying to get your shoulder blades to come back and pinch and open that chest. And if we can engage that upper back, that will slowly start to move your shoulders in a way that will support that posture. But again, it's going to take time. It's going to require you to do some strength work. It might require you to do some significant mobility work. If you can't create overhead extension here without like pushing your rib cage really forward, like if we can't get arm straight overhead without flaring the rib cage up, then we need to work on some level of shoulder mobility, because that is going to pin you forward. It's not going to be a choice. It's not going to necessarily be much else. Like we need to get your rotator cuff to allow you to get to some version of this position, or else we're going to just stay kind of hunched in the upper back, and that is going to continue to put stress on that lower back. Really depends on you and where you are, but you'll need to figure out what your body needs and then actually do those things to make that progress. And remember, like don't stop once you've gotten there. Once we've created some of those postural changes and gotten your rib cage to move appropriately and gotten your pelvis to sit appropriately, keep doing it. You don't need to do as much work to maintain progress as you did to create it, but we still need to keep doing some of that work because our everyday life as runners and desk workers tends to put us here. So if we don't do the work on a fairly consistent, like weekly, to some degree basis, then we will just end up back in this posture by next year, right? So don't spend 2 months of really hard work to make these improvements that you're looking to make, only to stop and end up in the exact same position next year. So I hope that made sense. I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions on low back pain or anything, please drop a comment or shoot me a message or shoot me a DM on Instagram at will.c.frantz. I'm happy to help you out as much as possible. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you for listening to the Trail and Ultra Running Training Podcast. Honestly, I'm still surprised and honored that anybody wants to hear what I have to say, so thank you. To be clear, not a doctor, nor a registered dietitian, or any other kind of medical professional. I'm a personal trainer, a nutrition coach, and a running coach, and I have a passion for training trail runners. You should always speak with a qualified medical professional before making any changes to your training or nutrition program. If you enjoyed the podcast or found it helpful, please take a second to leave a rating or review. I'd really appreciate it. Or you could just share it with someone for whom you think it might be helpful. I make these kinds of things in order to provide more quality, free resources to people, so the more people who hear it, the better. If you want more of this information, please head to the Trail and Ultra Running Training group on Facebook, where we discuss all aspects of training, so you can have more fun doing the sport that you love. Thank you again for listening.